I was sitting on the couch, tapping my foot anxiously, staring at the door. Clara, my wife of 2 years, had left earlier in the evening for her bachelorette party. She had been excited, full of energy, almost too much energy, like there was something she wasn't saying. But, again, I told myself I was just overthinking. It wasn't unusual for her to be excited before a big night out. She deserved to enjoy herself. After all, we were getting married in just a few days. It was supposed to be a celebration, a last hurrah with her closest friends before we took the plunge into marriage. But something in me, a small voice deep down, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. It wasn't her leaving for the party that bothered me. It wasn't even the late hour. It was the way she had looked at me when she kissed me goodbye, like she was trying to avoid eye contact, like she had something to hide. I had tried to brush it off. The logical part of my brain told me I was being paranoid. Clara and I were happy, right? At least, I thought we were. But the nagging feeling lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through messages, trying to distract myself. But every few minutes, I found my eyes drifting toward the clock, counting the hours since she'd left. The minutes felt like hours. Around midnight, I had sent her a text, just a casual check-in. Hope you're having fun. Stay safe. It was simple, no pressure. She always replied quickly when she was out, often with pictures or funny anecdotes about her friends. But tonight, the wait felt longer. I was starting to get restless, checking the phone more than I should, even considering calling her. I never wanted to be that guy, the overbearing husband who couldn't handle a night apart, but tonight, something felt different. Finally, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Having an amazing time. Don't wait up, Red Heart. I stared at the screen, trying to figure out what was off about it. The emojis, the forced cheerfulness, it just didn't sit right. We had been together long enough for me to sense when something was wrong, and right now, everything in me screamed that something wasn't adding up. She had told me earlier she'd be home by midnight. She had reassured me that it wouldn't be late, just a fun night with her friends. But it wasn't like her to leave me in the dark for so long without an update. Why the sudden overcompensation in her message? And why, after 2 years of marriage, did I feel so unsettled? I tossed my phone aside, pacing around the living room, trying to make sense of my thoughts. The house felt too quiet, too still. I knew I couldn't stay awake for much longer, but I didn't want to go to sleep either. Not while she was still out there. Not while I was left in this strange limbo of doubt and confusion. As the minutes ticked by, I found myself staring at the front door again, waiting for the sound of Clara's car pulling into the driveway. When she'd left, the street had been quiet, the world outside seemingly frozen in time. But now, as the hours stretched on, it felt like everything around me was slowly crumbling. My sense of peace, my trust, everything. Finally, I heard the familiar sound of tires crunching on the gravel. Clara's car. I jumped up from the couch, my heart beating faster than I expected. It was as though the very sound of her return had pulled me out of the fog, and for the first time that night, I felt awake, truly awake. The door creaked open, and I braced myself. Clara stepped in, smiling like nothing had changed, as if everything was perfectly normal. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice still bright, but not quite right. There was a hesitation there that I couldn't ignore. I stared at her, trying to gauge her expression. The smile was there, but the warmth had gone. Her eyes, usually full of life, seemed distant, cold almost. She seemed off. "But why? You're home late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You told me you'd be back by midnight." Clara blinked, almost as if she had to process the words. "Yeah, time just flew by. We were all having such a great time." She paused for a moment, then added, "Sorry if I worried you." The apology seemed too rehearsed, too forced. And then it hit me, the lingering doubt, the coldness in her voice. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't sure I could keep pretending that everything was fine anymore. Before I could say anything else, she brushed past me, heading upstairs without a second glance. Her heels clicked sharply on the stairs, echoing in the otherwise silent house. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. Clara had changed. The woman who had left for the party was no longer the same person standing in front of me. As I stood there, staring at the staircase, I made a decision. Tonight wasn't just any ordinary night. It was the night I would find out the truth. And whatever I uncovered, I was ready for it. The house felt unnervingly quiet as Clara disappeared upstairs. I stayed rooted to the spot, my mind racing. She had been distant, yes, but something more than that had shifted. I couldn't put my finger on it, but every fiber of my being was screaming that something wasn't right. I had always prided myself on being the kind of guy who trusted his partner, who never second-guessed her, but tonight felt like I was seeing her through a different lens. The smile she had given me when she walked in wasn't the smile I had fallen in love with. It was hollow, practiced. The energy she had when she left had been completely different from when she returned. It was almost as if she had been carrying something she didn't want me to see. I stood there for a moment, staring at the staircase. I had the overwhelming urge to go after her, to ask her what was going on, to demand some sort of explanation. But I stopped myself. I didn't want to be that guy, the clingy, overprotective husband who couldn't handle a night apart. I had always tried to be the calm one, the one who trusted her, no questions asked. But tonight, my mind was a storm, filled with questions I couldn't ignore. I tried to shake it off and tell myself I was being dramatic, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. I grabbed my phone from the couch, checking the time. It was already nearing 3 a.m., but there was no sleep for me tonight. I sat back down, scrolling mindlessly through social media, trying to distract myself. But the quiet in the house seemed to echo louder the longer I waited. My mind kept returning to that one question. What had really happened at that party? The house was still dark, but a soft light from the street lamp outside filtered in through the window. I couldn't help but glance at the front door every few minutes, even though I knew Clara was already home. It was as if I was waiting for something, or someone, to give me the answer I was too scared to ask for. The tension in the air was suffocating. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown to something I wasn't prepared for. I had never felt so unsure about her. The doubts, the feeling of betrayal, they had settled into the pit of my stomach like a heavy stone. I heard the distant sound of Clara moving around upstairs. It was subtle, but it was there. The light footsteps, the shifting of weight. Normally, I would have been able to ignore it, but tonight everything seemed amplified. My senses were heightened. Every little detail felt like a clue I couldn't decipher. The silence between us was becoming unbearable, and I found myself standing up, pacing the living room. What was I waiting for? I had to confront her. I had to know what was going on. But as soon as the thought crossed my mind, another part of me recoiled. What if I was wrong? What if I was overreacting and accusing her of something that wasn't even true? I couldn't be that guy. I had to trust her. But how could I, when the woman who had left that evening was no longer the woman who had come back? After what felt like an eternity, I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door upstairs. I froze. Clara's voice echoed from above, muffled by the distance, but I could hear enough to make out her words. She was talking to someone. I couldn't quite make out the conversation, but there was a definite tension in her voice. It wasn't her usual tone when she was just relaxing after a night out. There was something sharp, something defensive. I strained to hear more, my pulse quickening, but the conversation faded as she lowered her voice. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I wasn't going to let the mystery hang over me all night. I grabbed my jacket, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled it on. My heart was pounding in my chest as I slowly made my way to the stairs. The house was so still, the quiet so thick, it almost felt like I was moving through molasses. I reached the top of the stairs and hesitated for a moment, listening. Clara was in our bedroom. I could hear her shifting around, her voice still low, as though she was trying to keep her conversation hidden. But there was no one else in the house. No friends. No one who could be on the other end of the phone call, or whatever it was she was doing. I had to confront her. This silence, this distance, was too much. I needed to know the truth. Slowly, I reached for the door handle of our bedroom. It was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. Clara was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back turned to me. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a brief moment, I just watched her. There was something about the way she was sitting, something so off. It was like she was waiting for me to ask, but she wasn't ready to give me the answer. But the moment she heard the door, she stiffened. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression unreadable. The moment she saw me standing there, her lips parted slightly, and for a second, I saw the faintest flicker of surprise. Or was it guilt? In her eyes. "Did you need something?" Clara asked, her voice now void of the usual warmth. It It was almost like she was bracing herself for something. Her eyes darted around the room as though searching for an escape. I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what to say. The words felt stuck in my throat. All I knew was that something had changed, something I had no control over. And as Clara looked up at me, a strange tension hung in the air, one that neither of us could break. The truth was coming. I could feel it, but I wasn't sure I was ready for what would come next. The room felt heavier as I stood there. Clara's eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that left me speechless. I had expected something, an explanation, maybe a defensive response, or even just an attempt to shrug off the odd tension. But what I got was different. She didn't look surprised to see me. No, it was almost as if she had been waiting for this moment, bracing for what was to come. For a second, I wondered if she knew I had been listening, if she somehow sensed my doubt creeping into the house long before I had confronted her. "Is everything all right?" I asked, though I was certain my voice betrayed my anxiety. It wasn't a casual question. It was an interrogation wrapped in a thin veil of politeness. I wasn't sure how to even start, but I had to know. The weight in my chest only grew heavier with every passing second. Clara didn't answer right away. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were choosing her words carefully. For a moment, I thought she might lie. I had no evidence, just a feeling so strong it was nearly suffocating. But instead of the usual sharp deflection or excuses, she simply stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I had never seen her like this before. She wasn't angry, nor was she calm. It was almost as though she had resigned herself to something, as if the truth had already been decided, and she was now just waiting for me to catch up. "You're up late," she finally said, her voice soft but distant, as though she were trying to deflect my inquiry with an innocent observation. "I didn't think you'd be awake." I shook my head, the frustration building inside me. "Clara, you're avoiding the question. What's going on? I've been trying to ignore it all night, but now I can't." Her eyes flickered for a split second, like I had hit a nerve, but it was gone before I could catch it. She quickly looked down at her hands, nervously fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "I don't know what you're talking about," she muttered, but the way she said it made the words feel hollow, as though she were trying to convince both of us of something she wasn't sure was true. "Clara," I said again, this time stepping closer to her, my voice low but firm. "Why are you acting like this? You were fine when you left. Now, you come back and you're different. Something is off, and I need you to be honest with me." There was a long pause. The tension was thick, almost unbearable. Clara didn't speak, didn't even move. She just sat there, her body stiff and unyielding, as if the very act of acknowledging the truth might shatter something between us. I was about to speak again, to push her further, but then she finally looked up at me. The expression on her face was a mixture of guilt, regret, and something I couldn't name. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real, raw fear. It was like a cold rush of wind had blown through the room, unsettling everything in its path. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you." My heart skipped a beat. The words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt my chest tighten, the air in the room suddenly feeling too thick to breathe. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question was out before I could stop it, but it hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Clara swallowed hard, the silence between us growing heavier. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaky. I wasn't being truthful with you, and I didn't know how to tell you." She paused again, her gaze now focused on the floor, as if it was the only thing she could bear to look at. "I've been seeing someone else." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I staggered back, my legs weak, my mind spinning in circles. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Clara, my Clara, the woman I had married, had been seeing someone else behind my back. My thoughts crashed together in a disorienting wave of disbelief and rage. I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came. All I could do was stand there, staring at her. The room felt as though it had suddenly closed in on me, the walls tightening with every passing second. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to ask her how long this had been going on, to demand the truth, but I couldn't. The reality of what she had just admitted hit me like a freight train. Clara looked up at me again, her face pale and drawn. "I never wanted to hurt you," she repeated, her voice cracking. "It just happened." It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was confused, and I didn't know how to fix it. A bitter laugh escaped my throat, one that I hadn't expected, but it was there, sharp and hollow. Confused? I repeated. You were confused, and that's why you lied to me? That's why you've been sneaking around behind my back. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back, unable to let her get close. Please, don't touch me, I said, my voice hoarse. The hurt was so raw, so new, I could barely process it. Every part of me wanted to just walk out, to leave her standing there with her lies and her apologies, but I couldn't. I was stuck. I needed answers, even if I wasn't ready to hear them. Clara took a deep breath, as though trying to gather herself. It wasn't planned, okay? I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I don't know what went wrong, but it did. And now, I don't know how to fix it. I stared at her, trying to make sense of her words, but nothing made sense. I had trusted her. We had built a life together, and now, it felt like all of it was falling apart in an instant. The trust, the promises, the love we had shared. It was all shattered in one moment of brutal honesty. And I wasn't sure if I could ever put the pieces back together. Who is he? I asked, the words escaping before I could stop them. The question burned in my throat, but I had to know. I needed to know the extent of her betrayal. Clara hesitated, her face flushing with shame. She opened her mouth to say something but closed it again, as if the words were stuck, unable to come out. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said again, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I never wanted you to find out like this. I took a step back, my mind reeling. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't process the emotions crashing over me. All I knew was that everything had just changed. This wasn't the life I had imagined. This wasn't the future I had planned. And yet, here I was, standing in the room with Clara, trying to make sense of the broken pieces of what used to be my life. Clara's words hung in the air, a dense fog of confusion and hurt clouding my mind. I was frozen, standing there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with. Everything she had just said felt like a distant echo, as though it belonged to someone else, not the woman who had once promised to never hurt me. She had made a mistake, she said. But this wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight for who knew how long. I wanted to scream, to throw something, anything, across the room. The injustice of it all felt suffocating. My thoughts raced, colliding into each other, as I tried to process the words she had just spoken. She's been seeing someone else. The weight of that phrase echoed in my mind. Clara, my wife, had been unfaithful, and she was standing there, telling me about it as if it were a passing mistake, something to be fixed with an apology and a few tears. But the deeper I dug into my thoughts, the more questions surfaced. How could she do this to me? Was she seeing him for weeks? Months? How long had this been going on, and why hadn't I noticed? Every moment we had shared, every smile, every conversation, now felt tainted with this unbearable knowledge that it had all been a lie. I looked at Clara, her eyes brimming with tears, her hands nervously wringing the fabric of her dress. She was visibly distressed, but she hadn't yet fully admitted the truth I was desperately searching for. I needed more. I needed to know who this person was, what he meant to her, and why she had kept this secret from me. Who is he? I finally asked again, my voice low, raw with emotion. I couldn't even look her in the eye anymore. There was a part of me that was afraid to see the truth, to witness the wreckage of everything I had believed about our relationship. Clara hesitated, biting her lip as if the very name of the person she had been with was something too painful to utter. I watched her face, searching for any sign, any clue that might help me understand the depth of her betrayal. But she didn't speak. She just stood there, shaking her head slowly as if she didn't know where to begin. I don't want to hurt you more, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't want to say his name. I don't want to make this worse. But that was it. That was the moment that everything in me snapped. She had already made it worse. How could she possibly think that this wouldn't hurt more, that keeping the truth from me wasn't a part of the betrayal itself? I had to know. I had to understand why she had crossed that line, why she had shattered everything we had built. Clara, I said again, this time more firmly, I need to know. I need to know everything. I deserve that. I've been your husband. We've shared a life together. And now, You're standing here telling me you've been seeing someone else. You owe me the truth." I could see her crumble slightly under the weight of my words. She finally looked at me, her eyes clouded with guilt, regret, and something else, something darker, like she had already reconciled with the idea of losing me. It was as though she was prepared for the fallout, ready to face whatever consequences came next, even if it meant losing the one person who had trusted her more than anyone else. With a shaky breath, she finally spoke. "His name is Ben," she said quietly, almost as if whispering it to herself more than to me. "He's a coworker. We've been spending more time together, and it just happened. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." Ben. The name rang in my ears, loud and sharp. I didn't know who this person was. I hadn't heard of him before. But now, his name felt like a knife to my chest. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of Clara, the woman I had trusted completely, with someone else. How had this even happened? She had always been so careful with our relationship, so attentive, so loving. It didn't make sense. I took a step back, my mind racing. I needed air. I needed to think. But the room felt stifling, like the walls were closing in on me. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal, the lies, the secret life Clara had been living behind my back. It all felt like it was suffocating me. "How long, Clara?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain calm. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been hiding this from me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she looked away from me, unable to meet my gaze. "It started a few months ago," she said softly. "At first, it was just work stuff. We were working late on a project together, and we started talking more. But then we got closer, and I didn't know how to stop it. It was like I was trapped in something I couldn't control." I shook my head, not believing what I was hearing. I had been right there with her, living our life, and she had been slipping away into someone else's arms. It was incomprehensible. The anger was bubbling up inside me now, mixing with the hurt, with the feeling of being utterly betrayed. I had trusted her more than anything, and this was the last thing I had expected. "So, you've been seeing him behind my back for months? All this time, and you couldn't say anything? You couldn't tell me?" Clara broke down in front of me, her tears flowing freely now as she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't want to lose you, but I knew I was already losing you. And now," she trailed off, her voice breaking as she realized the enormity of what she had done. "I don't know how to make this right." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the rage that was threatening to spill over. The tears in her eyes, the apology, none of it mattered now. The damage was done. She had crossed a line that I didn't know how to come back from. "Clara," I said, my voice cold and sharp, "I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. You've torn everything apart, and now I'm left here, trying to pick up the pieces of a life I thought I knew." I turned away, walking toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed space. I needed to get out. I couldn't stand to be in that room for one more second, listening to her cry over something she had done willingly. But before I could leave, I heard her voice behind me, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I didn't want to lose you. I still don't." But as I stepped out of the room and into the hallway, I realized that maybe it wasn't just her I had lost, it was us. The life we had built was gone, and I didn't know if there was any way to put it back together. I could feel the air growing colder around me as I stood there in the hallway, unable to make my legs move. It was as if the floor beneath me had cracked open and swallowed everything I had ever known. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief, spinning faster than I could catch up. Clara's voice still echoed in my head, the words she had confessed swirling around in a loop that refused to let go. "I've been seeing someone else." The truth of it was suffocating. I stood frozen, barely hearing the muffled sound of her sobs from the bedroom. She had said she didn't want to lose me, but in that moment, I realized she had already lost me, and maybe she hadn't even realized it yet. Maybe she thought tears and apologies would make everything go back to normal, but there was no going back from this. No matter how hard I tried to breathe through it, the air felt thick, suffocating. I took a few steps forward, feeling the weight of every step pressed down on my chest. My thoughts were a blur. What was I supposed to do now? Was I supposed to just forgive her? Was I supposed to pretend that what had happened, what she had done, didn't matter? The anger that had been simmering inside me suddenly erupted, and for the first time in years, I felt completely powerless. I had trusted her with everything, and now I had nothing. I walked toward the living room, my hands trembling as I reached for my phone. I needed to talk to someone, anyone. My best friend, Jake, had always been the one I went to when things went wrong, and right now, everything felt so wrong that I couldn't even trust my own thoughts. I needed clarity. But when I unlocked my phone and saw Clara's text message from hours ago, the one she had sent when she first went out, having an amazing time. Don't wait up, red heart. It hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she have sent that to me? So carefree, so normal, while hiding the truth. While she was with him, with Ben. It felt like a mockery. I tossed my phone back onto the couch, pacing again, my mind spinning out of control. It was like everything I thought I knew about her had been a lie. I couldn't reconcile the woman I had married, the woman I thought I understood, with the person she was now. And even more troubling, how much of what she had told me was the truth? Had she really just gotten caught up? Or had this been something planned, something deliberate from the start? There was a noise behind me. I turned, and for a moment, I thought I saw Clara standing in the doorway. But it wasn't her. It was just the shadow of her figure, cast against the wall, a reminder of the woman I once knew, or thought I knew. I swallowed hard, trying to push the thoughts out of my head, but they came flooding back, each one more insistent than the last. How could you do this? I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. My voice was shaky, but the words were clear. How had she gone from the woman I'd married, the woman I'd promised to love and protect, to someone I didn't recognize? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I didn't even know where to begin. The pain felt unbearable, like it was eating me from the inside out. And then, a voice broke through the silence. Clara. I looked up and saw her standing at the end of the hallway, her face pale, eyes red from crying. She took a few hesitant steps toward me, her hands trembling. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I shook my head, the bitterness in my chest making it hard to speak. You've already hurt me, I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. You didn't just make a mistake, Clara. You didn't just slip up. You've been lying to me for months, and now, I don't even know who you are anymore. She flinched, her eyes welling up with more tears. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't bring myself to pretend that everything would be okay. This wasn't just something that could be fixed with a few words, a few apologies. This was bigger than that. This was the end of something I couldn't get back. I don't know how to fix this, Clara whispered, her voice cracking. I don't know how to make it right. But I'm sorry. I really am. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't just about being sorry. I wanted to tell her that words didn't mean anything anymore. But what was the point? It wouldn't change what had already been done. I couldn't just ignore it, sweep it under the rug. Not when I had given her everything. My trust, my love, my loyalty. And she had thrown it all away for some guy I didn't even know. I couldn't even wrap my mind around the idea of her with him. Of her choosing him over me. I need space. I finally said, my voice firm despite the pain tearing at me. I need time to think. To figure out what I'm supposed to do with all of this. Clara took a step forward, but I held up my hand, stopping her. Please, Clara. Please give me some time. She nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. And with that, she turned and walked away, back to the bedroom, where the echoes of our shattered life hung in the air like an invisible weight. I stood there in the silence, feeling like everything was slipping through my fingers. The life I thought I had was no longer mine. The woman I had married was no longer the same person. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that we could somehow find a way back to each other. But as I stood there in the dim light of the living room, staring at the empty space where Clara had just been, I realized something. There was no going back. Not anymore. What had been broken could not be fixed, and the trust we had built was gone. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. I sat down on the couch, burying my face in my hands, the weight of it all finally crashing down on me. I had been living a lie, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to face the truth. The silence in the house felt almost suffocating as I sat there on the couch, my mind a whirlwind of fragmented thoughts and unanswered questions. The weight of Clara's betrayal hung heavily in the air, making every breath feel like it was pulling me deeper into a place I didn't want to go. I could hear the distant sound of her soft sobs from the bedroom, but it didn't make me feel any less hollow. If anything, it only made everything worse. The tears, the apologies, they felt like nothing more than the remnants of a love that had been torn apart in an instant. I leaned back, my head resting against the couch, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in my own thoughts, trapped in the mess Clara had created. The house was too quiet now, too still. Everything felt out of place. I kept replaying the same thoughts over and over in my head. How could she do this to me? How could she betray everything we built, everything we shared? The clock ticked on, but it felt like time had stopped. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling me out of my spiral for a brief moment. I reached for it without thinking, half expecting it to be Clara trying to apologize again, or maybe a message from Jake, who I had texted earlier, asking if he was free to talk. But when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was Clara's best friend, Sophie. I stared at the message for a few seconds, trying to summon the strength to open it. Why was she texting me? Was Clara telling her something? I clicked on the message, the words immediately making my heart race. Hey, I hope you're doing okay. I know Clara's been a bit distant lately, but I think she's been going through something. I don't know if you've noticed, but she's been acting different. I really hope everything's all right with you too. Let me know if you need anything. My breath caught in my throat. Distant? Acting different? Sophie had known. Sophie had seen the change, felt it too. And yet, she hadn't said anything. She hadn't warned me. I felt my hands tremble as I reread the message, each word stinging more than the last. How could Sophie know something was wrong and not tell me? How could Clara have been so dishonest, even with her closest friends? The betrayal seemed even worse now, knowing that people close to her had seen it but kept quiet, letting me believe everything was fine while she hid what was really going on. I tossed my phone back onto the coffee table in frustration. It felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about Clara, was falling apart. There were so many questions, so many things left unsaid. How long had this been going on? How long had she been lying to me, living this double life? And why didn't I see the signs earlier? I had always thought I knew her better than anyone. I had trusted her completely. The anger bubbling inside me finally surfaced, but it wasn't the kind of anger that felt like a release. No, it was the kind of anger that consumed you, the kind that burned from the inside out, making you question everything you believed in. I stood up abruptly, the force of it almost knocking me back, and paced the living room. I deserved more than this. I deserved the truth. My mind kept going back to Clara's face when she first told me. The tears, the guilt. She had said she didn't know how to fix it, didn't know how to make it right. But there was nothing to fix. The truth was that everything had already been broken, shattered in pieces so small that I wasn't sure I could ever put them back together again. I couldn't stop my thoughts from spiraling. The more I thought about it, the more the betrayal stung. She had been with him, for months, and all the while, I had been in the dark, thinking we were fine. We were about to get married. How could she throw that all away? How could she throw me away so easily? The anger and pain felt like they were rising up, threatening to drown me. It was unbearable. I felt like I was losing myself, losing control over the only thing I had ever believed was truly mine. My life, my relationship with Clara. I slammed my fist against the wall, the force of it sending a shock of pain through my hand. But it was nothing compared to the ache inside me. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I stood there, breathing heavily, my body shaking. I knew I had to talk to Clara. I had to confront her, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if there was anything left to say. I had spent so many years believing in our love, in the future we were going to build, and now it felt like it had all been a lie. As the minutes passed, I realized I couldn't stay in this house anymore. I couldn't be trapped in this place, drowning in the mess of our broken relationship. I needed air, I needed space. I grabbed my jacket and stormed toward the door, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stepped out into the cool night air, hoping it would clear my mind, if only for a moment. I walked aimlessly, my mind still racing. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I needed to keep moving, to escape the suffocating silence of our home, the house that used to feel like a sanctuary. It was now just a reminder of everything I had lost. I wandered through the streets, my thoughts swirling, replaying everything that had happened. Clara's confession, her tears, her apology, but none of it felt real. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed all the signs? I needed answers, but more than that, I needed a way to stop the pain that was eating me alive. I finally stopped at a park bench, the cold metal biting through my jacket. I sat down, staring at the empty space in front of me, trying to clear my head. I needed to decide what came next. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, in this state of confusion. I had to confront Clara. I had to get the truth, the full truth, no matter how much it hurt. I just didn't know if I was strong enough to handle it. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. The cold night air stung my face as I sat on the park bench, the weight of everything pressing down on me with each passing second. I tried to focus on something outside the storm of thoughts in my head, but the truth was I couldn't escape the images of Clara, her tear-streaked face, the confession she had dropped on me like a bombshell. I had always thought we were invincible, that we had something real, something solid. But now, sitting here, I realized how fragile everything had been. I wasn't sure how long I had been sitting there, lost in my own thoughts, but eventually, the weight of it all became too much to bear. I couldn't avoid Clara forever. I couldn't hide from the inevitable. There was no more room for denial. I had to go back, face her, and hear whatever else she had to say, even if I didn't want to. I didn't know how much of the truth was still out there, but I was certain I was going to get it tonight. I stood up from the bench, my legs unsteady, and began walking back toward the house. The walk felt endless, but I wasn't sure if that was the walk itself or the anticipation that was gnawing at me. The closer I got to our front door, the harder it became to breathe. My chest tightened with every step. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand resting on the knob. What was I going to say to her? How would this confrontation unfold? There was so much I still didn't know, so many layers to this betrayal that I hadn't even begun to uncover. I opened the door quietly, the familiar sound of it creaking in the stillness of the night. The house was dark, eerily quiet, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped inside. It was like the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. I walked through the hallway, every creak of the floorboards under my feet sounding like a thunderclap in the silence. When I reached the bedroom, I stood outside the door for a moment, listening. I could hear Clara's soft breathing, but she wasn't sobbing anymore. The silence that had settled between us felt almost more painful than any argument we could have had. She was waiting, I realized, waiting for me to come to her. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. Clara was sitting on the bed, her back to me, her face buried in her hands. Her sobs were quiet now, but the ache in her chest was still there. She didn't look up when I entered, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what to do. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, it all felt like it was bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me, threatening to consume me entirely. But I had to stay calm. I had to know the truth. Clara, I said softly, my voice shaking, though I wasn't sure whether it was from anger or from the deep hurt that had been gnawing at me for hours. I need you to look at me. I can't do this unless you look me in the eye. She slowly lowered her hands, but it was as if she was gathering the courage to face me, to let me see her brokenness. When her eyes met mine, I saw the same regret, the same guilt I had seen earlier. But there was something else now, fear. Fear that she had lost me for good. And in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just her I was fighting for. It was me, too. I was fighting for the person I used to be, for the life I thought I had. I need to know everything, Clara, I said, stepping closer. My heart was pounding, my thoughts scattered, but I was determined. I needed to hear her tell me everything. The truth. All of it. She hesitated for a moment, as if she was debating whether or not to tell me more. But she had already started, and I could tell she knew she couldn't hide anymore. She opened her mouth, and this time, the words came faster than before. It started with the project, she said. Ben and I were working late at the office. We started talking more, and I didn't think it would go anywhere. But then it did. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you, but I felt like I already had. So I kept it a secret, and the longer I did, the harder it became. Each word felt like a punch in the gut, but I forced myself to keep listening. I needed to hear it all. She had already done the unthinkable, but hearing her admit it, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it real. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was the unraveling of everything I thought we had. You've been lying to me for months, I said, my voice hoarse, barely able to hold it together. You've been living this double life, and I had no idea. I didn't want this, I swear, Clara pleaded, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could handle it, that I could keep it all together, but I couldn't. I thought I was falling in love with Ben, and I couldn't tell you. I was too afraid of losing you, so I kept lying, and I thought maybe if I just kept pretending, it would go away. But it didn't. And now everything is broken. Her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I was numb. I didn't know what to say. The life I thought I had was gone. She had already taken so much from me, my trust, my love, my certainty in everything we had built. Now, she was admitting it all, and I wasn't sure if it made it better or worse. Is that what this is about? I finally asked, my voice cold and detached. You thought you could keep me in the dark while you lived out some fantasy with him? While you were falling in love with him? Clara flinched at my words, as though they had struck a deep, painful chord. No, she began, but I cut her off. You can't keep pretending, Clara, I said sharply. You've destroyed everything. You've broken the trust we had, and I don't know if I can ever rebuild it. She shook her head, her tears falling freely now. I know I've ruined everything. I can't change what I did, but I swear to you, I never meant for this to happen. But there was no more room for apologies. No more room for explanations. The truth was that everything had been tainted. And as much as I wanted to believe that we could fix it, part of me knew that it was too late. The woman who stood before me wasn't the same person I had married. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. I need to think, Clara, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't make any decisions right now, but I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was before, and I'm not sure who you are anymore, either. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Clara behind. But as I stepped into the cold night air again, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just confronting her. It was confronting myself. Who was I now? Who was I becoming? And would I ever be able to find my way back to the man I used to be? The answer, I realized, was still out there, in the shattered pieces of my heart and the life I once knew. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to pick them up. The cold air of the night seemed to wrap around me as I walked down the empty street, the weight of everything still hanging heavily on my shoulders. The pain of betrayal, the shock of Clara's confession, and the haunting uncertainty of what was to come. It all felt like a tidal wave that had crashed into me without warning, and I was struggling to keep my head above water. But as I walked, a strange calm began to settle over me. Maybe it was the distance from the chaos, or maybe it was just the silence of the night, but I started to realize something important. I didn't need to have all the answers right away. I didn't need to figure everything out in this moment. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk, and I had the power to choose what that journey looked like. I stopped walking, standing at the edge of the park where I had sat earlier, and looked up at the sky. The stars were out, twinkling faintly above, like a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was still light. It was a small thing, but it brought me a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I wasn't alone in this. I was still me, even if everything around me had changed. After a few moments of reflection, I realized that despite everything, despite the hurt and the betrayal, I still had a choice. I could either let this define me, let it break me completely, or I could find a way to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy. Trust would take time, if it ever came back. But there was still something worth fighting for, not just for Clara, but for myself. I had spent so long losing myself in her, in us, that I had forgotten about who I was before this all started. And now, it was time to remember. I turned back toward the house, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't running away. I was facing the truth. And while it hurt, I knew it was the only way forward. As I entered through the front door, the quiet was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't the suffocating silence from before. It was the calm before the storm of change. Clara was waiting in the living room, her eyes red from crying, but there was a flicker of hope in them, as if she was waiting for something or someone to guide them both back to the right path. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, but this time, she didn't cry. Instead, she looked at me, not with guilt, but with something else, an understanding that this wasn't the end of us, but a turning point. I don't know if you can forgive me, Clara said softly, her voice almost hesitant. I don't know if we can go back to what we were, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you. I walked over to her, my heart still heavy, but lighter than before. I'm not sure we can go back to what we were either, I said, my voice steady. But I'm willing to try too. Not because I think it'll be easy, but because I believe in what we had. And I think we both deserve a chance to rebuild. Her eyes brightened, the faintest glimmer of hope returning. So, we're not done? I shook my head. No, we're not done. We've got a long road ahead of us, Clara. But maybe, just maybe, we can build something new. Something better. Something that starts with honesty, with truth. It's going to take time, and there will be moments where it feels impossible. But I believe we can get through this, together. Clara stepped forward, her hands reaching for mine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the warmth of her touch. She wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we were both willing to try. And that was enough. For now, it was enough. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking. Not just the superficial things we'd hidden behind for months, but the real, raw conversations that had been buried under layers of unspoken words and broken trust. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of silence, moments where the weight of everything we had been through hung heavy in the air. But slowly, piece by piece, we began to rebuild what had been shattered. And as the days passed, it became clear that this wasn't the end of our story. It was a new beginning. One where we had to fight for each other, fight for the trust we'd lost, and fight for a future that was uncertain, but still full of possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing. It was ours to shape. Together. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.